Hi, this is Georgia again with Puking Pastels. This segment will discuss pattern markings, what they mean, and how to put them on your fabric. Next, we're going to talk about all of the pattern markings that you're going to find as you are cutting your patterns. The first one is this long straight line with an arrow at each end. This is the grain line. You're going to place this line on the grain lengthwise of your fabric. These notches, sometimes they can be shown as triangles. They can also be shown as little dash lines. You're going to mark these on your fabric, or you can clip them. Now in order to clip them, I've traced this on some tissue paper and drawn in my pattern markings here. Some people like to clip into them, into the seam allowance with their scissors, like that. And you certainly would on these lines. But with these triangles, you can also cut a triangle out as you're cutting. It's just up to you and what your preference is. You can also cut the triangle out as well. Instead of just snipping in, you can actually cut out the triangle. Like this. That's just your personal preference. This is a piece of a pattern from one of the European commercial patterns. They look a little bit different than the American ones, but not much. We're going to look at a few markings on here. Down here at the bottom are your cutting lines, and it tells you which size is each line. And on this one, each line looks different, so as you're cutting, you know which one to follow for which size you're doing. Right here is all the information of this one pattern piece. This is piece number 16. This is the front. And then you're going to put it on the fold, and you're cutting one, it says right here. And it also gives you the seam allowance that you will be using. It'll also be found in the instructions. Up here, on each pattern piece, you'll generally find the finish bust line as well as waist lines. So if you're trying this on whoever it is you're making it for, you can measure to make sure that's in the right spot. And these are small dots. There are many different ways to mark these on your fabric. You can stick a pin through it, through your fabric, and then mark it by pulling the pattern up and then marking your fabric underneath. Or you can just mark it with a fabric marker. Another way I like to do this marking, we're going to pretend that this is a small dot right here that I've marked on this pattern piece, is you take a needle, double threaded, put it in all the way through the pattern and your fabric, and directly right up, pull it taut, and then clip the threads. Then as you pull off your pattern piece, you're going to have that marking right there, and it's temporary. You're just going to pull it right out when you're done. This is a pattern piece from a vintage pattern. I just wanted you to show how different it looks. These dark lines are the cutting lines. It says right here, cutting line. And here again is your grain line. We're going to place that straight on the grain. And these are the notches. And again, it gives you the option of cutting into the seam allowance or cutting out those notches. This is an American commercial pattern piece. Here you have all your cutting lines, your sizes. This is what the notches usually look like. And in the middle here, it generally has at least 2 languages. So we've got third tier, view C, cut 3, and then in various languages here, and it's pattern piece number 11. And it's reminding you what seam allowance you'll be using later. This is also a vintage piece, which is why it has so much love. You can see there's some holes, and all the notches are cut. But what I wanted to show you on this one are the buttonhole markings. You're going to take this and put it on your fabric and draw it exactly like this. It's kind of difficult to do when you have the paper on top of it, but you can lift it up and mark it, or you can cut it with scissors and then draw through it with a fabric marker. And once again, this is showing you the seam allowance. This dotted line is where you will be sewing on the fabric, and this section is the seam allowance. A seam allowance is the amount of fabric you're going to have on the outside of the seam. So that's how far away from the edge of the fabric you will be sewing. Generally, it's 5/8 of an inch or 1.5 centimeters. Sometimes it's different and your pattern will tell you, but that's what your seam allowance is. The next marking I'd like to talk about is a dart marking. It's shown as a triangular shape on the pattern. The straight solid line down the middle is the fold line. You'll need to mark the dots. There's always one at the point of the dart and maybe some along the sewing lines, which are the dotted lines, and then 2 right at the end. Now, in order to make a dart, I'll just show you with the paper quickly. You fold on the solid line and you match those dotted lines together as well as the dots. You'll sew. And the final product will make a shape that will fit the bust of a woman's shirt. Just like that. The last pattern marking I'd like to talk about is this marking right here. It's a fold marking. So this line is going to be placed on the fold of the fabric so that when you cut it, it's going to open up into a whole piece like this. Sometimes it's shown as this half rectangle with 2 arrows pointing into the fold line. Sometimes you have to be paying a lot of attention because it just has the words. It doesn't have any markings. Right here it says center front fold, straight grain. So fold it on the straight grain and place this line on the fold.